Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fun FTC. Tonight, we're kicking off our new Center Stage season with a Center Stage breakdown and discussion show. Declan and I are going to take a dive into 3 different elements of the game that we think are really important and all teams should be thinking about if they want to compete with the best of the best this season. And we'll give some predictions on what we think the game will be like, different strategies, things like that. So it's going to be a great show, and it's coming up right now on First Updates Now.
This Stream on Fun is brought to you in part by the following partners. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in FIRST scholarship. Scholarship applications will open in September. Get ready to go pro and get more information at kettering.edu/first. The new Robotics system by AnyMark can reduce complexity and enable robust builds. Parts aligned to a common 1/2-inch grid, simplifying construction and allowing alignment of both structure and motion components. Robotics enables teams to always have the parts they need to complete a build. Head on over to anymark.com/robotics to learn more and order today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fun FTC. As we kick off our first show of the Center Stage season, I wanted to introduce myself, Abbas, and Declan, my co-host for tonight, as well as our producer, Tyler, working to put together this fantastic show. So before we jump into our discussion points for the night, we should definitely start with an overview of the new game. Center Stage seems to combine a lot of elements of previous games, but also bring some new challenges that we've never seen before, and I think teams will really enjoy trying to come up with solutions for. So the main game element this year is called a pixel, and it's a hexagonal plastic element that's a 1/2 inch thick and about 3 inches wide. There are 94 of these on the field, 64 white, 10 yellow, 10 green, and 10 purple pixels, and some of them are stored in the human player station, which can then be put into the wings, as they're called, and others start on the field in 6 stacks of 5. So also in the center of the field this year, as you can see on the screen right now, there are horizontal poles of varying heights. These prevent robots from being too tall, and also they're game elements for robots to hang on in the end of the game. The middlemost pole is actually able to pivot, allowing robots to push it up and down so they can traverse more easily around the center of the field. So the game starts with a 30-second autonomous where you can place your purple and yellow preloaded pixels in the correct position based on the randomization of your team prop or a white pixel. Then you can continue cycling if you have time, and at the end, park in the backstage, which is that taped off region in the back of the field. Now, after this, the driver controlled period has the main objective of placing as many pixels as possible onto the backdrop. That's that slanted large black piece in the back of the field inside the backstage. So there's a lot of things going on with this. You can get extra points for making mosaics, which are groups of 3 pixels that all of them are either the same non-white color or they're all 3 different non-white colors. And then also, if you stack enough pixels tall enough, then you can reach these set bonuses that are shown with those horizontal white taped lines. Now, the endgame period has 2 main objectives: launching drones or paper airplanes, and the second is hanging, which is just suspending yourself off of the ground enough using the riggings, which are about 23.5 to 24 inches off of the tiles. Overall, I'm a huge fan of the game. I think it poses some really interesting challenges, but has enough similarities to previous things we've seen in the past that rookie teams won't have too hard of a time and can still build successful robots. Also, it seems that the point scoring is pretty balanced in this game. Similar to previous years, there's a 100-point cap for the basic max autonomous, not counting any additional cycling, and there's a 100-point cap for the max endgame. And I think we'll see driver controlled period scores around 100 to 150 being like really good for the beginning to mid-season. And then towards the time of late regionals and worlds, we'll see scores pushing 180 to maybe even 200 in that driver controlled period. So just for some reference, the way I got those numbers, 180 to 200 is like 3 to 5 mosaics with 3 set bonuses and 40 pixels being placed. So it's not the absolute max score, but it's really getting up there. And so, yeah, I think that's enough of an overview. Declan, you want to start us off by talking about some different ways you think teams will be collecting pixels? No, I think he was muted. All right, all good now, Declan. Go ahead.
All right.
Oh, you just muted yourself again.
Are we good now?
Yes, you're good now.
Oh, okay.
Hey, audience, sorry about that. We're going to reset here and just re-go. Sometimes that happens.
All right.
Declan, you want to try out your headset real quick?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're kind of cutting in and
Yes, I
out,
can
man.
hear
You're a
you.
little. I can hear it scratching a bit.
Oh. How about is it better now?
Not really, no.
Okay. Let me try one more thing. Sorry about that.
All right.
It was working perfectly up until now. Um. All right. How's it now?
Yeah, that's great.
All right.
Yeah, sure. So, I think that's enough of an overview of the center stage game. Declan, why don't you start us off by talking about some different ways you think teams will be collecting those pixels?
Yeah, so looking at the pixels, there are three immediate intake styles I can see. First one being kind of top-down style intake using some surgical tubing or compliant wheels, pulling the pixels into the robot from the top down. The other variation of this would be kind of a low-to-the-ground vector intake to help try to pull the pixels in from the sides. This would also be with compliant wheels or like surgical tubing, beater bar-esque designs. The last design I can see teams going for early in the season would be kind of a low to the ground claw. This would be able to pick up one or two of the pixels depending on what the teams feels needed, and then they can figure out how to score those like in the meantime. The other large aspect of the game elements this year is the fact that teams are allowed to possess two pixels at a time. This opens up a window of opportunity for different ways that a team could try to design a storage or deposit mechanism for these pixels and try to figure out like, do they want to grab two of the same always? Do they want to figure out to create a mechanism to deposit one or the other, or just try like drop them out of a chute and just doesn't matter about the order? What do you think of us?
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a couple of really great points. So we can spend some time talking about each of those intake styles a little bit. I guess the first one that you mentioned was a top-down vector intake. You said, you would recommend using surgical tubing or compliant wheels for that. So, for those teams can really look at games like Ultimate Goal or maybe something from Vex. Yeah, we have that right up on the screen here, Tyler. That's a perfect shot. And I think the main reason these work really well is they give you a really nice reach. You can use the length of those surgical tubings to go a little further out of your robot and grab the pixels a lot quicker. And then also with the hole in the center of the pixel, it really allows you to just like latch in there with the surgical tubing finger and pull it into your robot. Would you agree, Declan?
Yeah, I definitely would agree. And there's also like certain aspects that they could try to add into kind of the top down intake. Like they could try to do something similar to what teams would do in Freight Frenzy, where they would have this similar like surgical tubing intake, but then it would like bring the discs or the freight, or in this case the pixels, into like a compartment that they could use to maneuver into a different like mechanism on the robot that could be used for scoring.
Yeah, definitely. And so now talking about the second type, you said, with more of a low to the ground vector intake. So this would be pulling in the pixels from the sides, as you mentioned. And so for this, I think teams can look a lot more at the Skystone Challenge, as we see on screen here. Team 11970 Titanium Talons, Titanium Talons always makes fantastic robots. And this is really good. I think this year, especially, it has potential because the pixels are a lot more rigid than the ultimate goal rings were a couple years ago, right? They're a lot more like the Skystones, I would imagine. And so you'll be able to get a good grip right around the sides if you can get wheels that are low enough to the ground. I do think the height of the pixels could be kind of a problem, but we'll see. We'll see what teams come up with. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that having the side intakes with the more rigid would of the rigidity of the pixels makes it a lot easier to have like a consistent intake if they're able to get it low, like you said before. But I feel like if teams are able to get this like working well, it could be one of the best styles of intake because of how fast and efficient it would be. All they have to do is just drive into the pixel, and then they don't have to worry about it. Like, is it in? Did it transfer properly? Because of how consistent this style would be.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And then, going on to the last style that you mentioned, you really have to remember sometimes keeping it simple is really the best way to go. And that would be with a claw. And so, you mentioned sometimes teams may do one claw that can pick up 2 pixels at a time, or they'll have two separate claws to maneuver and, collect and control those pixels. So I'm really interested to see like what type of claw designs come out. I know last year, Looney Claw was really popular. We'll see if they come out with something similar this year that really helps rookie teams out, just getting off the ground so they can learn about their software and practicing and what it takes to do well at competitions and things like that. So I think that's really interesting. And one thing that someone in the comments there in the chat just brought up, JD0101, and I was just about to bring up, is the stack. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to talk about that I know the top teams will be spending a lot of time on. You have those 6 neutral stacks in the front of the field with 5 elements each. You have to make sure that you can get the pixels off of it the exact way you want every single time, right? So I'm not saying you have to keep them on the stack. For some teams, keeping them on the stack and picking them off one by one could definitely be the play. But for others, just ramming into them, making sure they're all scattered on the ground, and then using some sort of active intake to pick it up could be a better decision. So I'm really interested to see like what teams come up with for that. I think it's a little early for me to say something on like how I would do that. Just I haven't really gotten my hands on the field or anything like that. But I think there'll definitely be some clever solutions throughout the season. What do you think, Declan?
Yeah, the talking about the stacks was a big a big part of like what style of intake you want to go for, because with the like trying to keep it as like a 5 stack kind of idea, you could try to have the side intake be a style where it would be able to vector like the one the pixel on the lowest part of the stack,
Mm-hmm.
and then try to like keep it intact, kind of like
Yeah.
removing the lowest point like quick, like one of those tablecloth tricks. But
Yeah, yeah, no, that'd be really
uh,
interesting. You'd have to be careful with possession penalties, but I'm sure if it's within the scope of the rules, teams will definitely find a way to pull it off. And then we have another comment in the chat from NA9306. Definitely going to get to this coming up. So the next discussion topic I wanted to talk about tonight was just general game strategy and types of robots. Every year from the very beginning, I think everyone's always asking, what's the meta? What's the meta? What's the meta? And it's for a good reason too. Understanding how the game is going to be played at a high level is really critical to doing well in competition throughout the season. And so this year, I personally think there's a little bit less strategy involved as compared to last year's power play season, but there definitely still is a lot to discuss. I think just the fact that both alliances don't have to score on the same element really makes it a lot easier as far as game strategy goes. You don't have to think about like the chickening between going for the same pole or ownership and things like that. But there definitely is a lot going on. I think the first place to start here is just talking about how teams will interact with their own alliance, right? So if you're on the blue alliance, how are you going to work with your blue partner? And I think there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn to Skystone here. So in Skystone, the big discussion was, do you go for that stacker feeder strategy, or do you go for having 2 stacker bots, right, that are just running all the way from the loading zone all the way over? And as we can see in the video here on the screen, the world record at the end of Skystone was set by 2 teams that were both stacker bots, right? It's not like one was feeding the other. They were both making independent stacks. However, to counter this, from my understanding, basically every other top 10 score was all stacker feeder bots. I was a member of the drive team that had one of the tallest stacks, the 12 stack in Skystone, and we had that because we had a stacker feeder system going, and it worked really well for us. So this year, I think that'll be a really important distinction to make. I do think it'll be a little bit easier for stacker feeders to work together, because in Skystone, there was the issue of having one bot going all the way through like under the poles or going all the way out instead of like handing it off halfway, which definitely made it a little tricky. But this year, the rule isn't like that. So I think that'll change it. What do you think, Declan?
Yeah, I think the stacking feeding is definitely going to be a viable strategy, especially with the like going under the bridge not being a requirement anymore for additional points.
Mhm.
I can definitely see teams especially like earlier on, if the trying to score on the backdrop is a little bit too difficult, like trying to optimize their robot for feeding and just like trying to get to the best they can, with extensions and rotations to help maximize these uh, cycle times with trying to just cycle the pixels from the wing all the way over to the other half of the field being like such a large distance for driving. Trying to cut that in half with having a feeder bot could very likely maximize scores.
Yeah, and another thing with that is just the fact that it's going to take a lot of teamwork to balance that. You have to make sure you're not hitting each other, you're not getting in each other's ways. But there is something to consider is that there's two things really. One, first is that scoring on the backdrop is not the only way to get points, right? You can still just push the pixels into the backstage area, which is that taped off area, which should be a lot easier for teams to do because you don't necessarily need some sort of linear slide mechanism or an arm or anything like that. And the second thing to consider is that the backdrop is about, I think, 22 and a half or 23 to 24 inches wide. So there is room for two robots to be there, and they can work together to try and score. But it'll definitely be pretty difficult, and I'm excited to see what teams do for it. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was defense. It seems every year defense is a bigger and bigger part of discussion. And so, Declan, what are your thoughts? Do you think defense will be like huge this year, or it really won't see too much action on the playing field?
I think defense is definitely going to be prevalent in the season. I don't know how much it'll be compared to games like Freight Frenzy, where it was almost a necessity. But in this case, I feel like most of the defense is going to be happening over on um, the like feeding area where all the pixels are on the with the five stacks and the wings. I feel like there's going to be a lot of pushing and shoving battles over, especially those stacks of pixels that are neutral, or like trying to not necessarily block off access to the wings, but like kind of
Just making it more difficult.
right, like just
Yeah.
being in the way and a kind of nuisance, and then just letting them go in after a little bit, just like as because they have those conflicting paths, right, between the red and the blue alliances. So it's there's I feel like there's going to be a lot of even unintentional defense where teams are just colliding with each other, trying to get to their destinations.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, we just had a little clip of the power play defense that was going on, really crazy stuff. But I think it won't get quite to that level. But, by the time Worlds comes around, you really never know. So going on, this is something that I wanted to save until the end of like general game strategy and talking about types of bots. But I think it's just one of the most important decisions that teams will have to make. So this has to do with figuring out the height of your robot, right? With this year with so many vertical limitations, you have your rigging and your trusses and your stage door. There's just so many things to consider with how tall your robot's going to be. It's really important to make a sound decision on exactly what you're going to settle on for the height, and so I'm really, really interested to see if anybody's able to pull off a robot that's like 11 to 12 inches tall and can still complete all the game challenges. Because, in my opinion, not having to interact with that stage door and not losing any time or energy or mechanisms on dealing with that is going to be huge. It'll just make you so versatile around the field. That being said, I do think it's going to be a very difficult challenge because the top of the backdrop is about 30 inches tall, right? And so if you have an 11 to 12-inch robot, that's another 20 inches of extension you need, or like two times more than just the height of your robot. So trying to fit all of that in is going to be really, really interesting. Declan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that in order to optimize like the mobility of your robot, you really need to be like at a minimum under those 14 inches that you can go under the trusses.
Mhm.
And then either try to find a way to get under the 12 inches so that you don't have to interact with the centerpiece, or have an efficient way of dealing with it being in the way. But I feel like having a trying to make your robot compact enough is really gonna increase your chances of like not having any like catch ups with mechanisms trying to like interact with that center part, um, as well as still trying to be able to fit all the mechanisms into such a compact area. I feel like robots are now going to start potentially being wider in order to fit all of this like components in a like 12-inch height.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a great analysis right there. Trying to use some of that width in order to make up for the lost in height. And so I wanted to address something. Someone said in the chat is I feel like there isn't enough room to have two robots and running auto like Skystone. This is definitely something important to think about. In Skystone, we saw very few, if any, teams running two autonomous programs where both would try and stack over in the corner of the field in autonomous. And I think this year, just due to advancements in just general programming and how good people have gotten with building their robots and driving and all the automations, I think we'll see some of that at high levels. If I had to name one team that I think could do it, it would definitely be Upper Creek. It seems every single year they've been able, in the past couple of years, they've been able to make an autonomous that can just go all the way from one corner of the field to the other with complete ease. Just not get in the way of anyone and really figure out how to work well with teams. So I think it will be possible. I definitely don't think it will be easy or common at all. Declan, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like especially going into worlds like high level competition play, trying to have both teams scoring on the backdrop or even just pushing them into the backstage in general is going to be crucial because there's going to be at least someone who's figured that out, and having to go up against the person that has that autonomous and you are just missing out on those points is going to be um,
Yeah.
pretty difficult to try to make those up in tally up.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing I wanted to ask you about that with Declan is this year with those neutral stacks of the pixels, do you think teams will be able to clear like all 15 of the neutral pixels on their half of the field in autonomous, or you don't really see anyone doing that?
I don't see all 15 just because of like how like close together they are. I feel like it's kind of a requirement to have both teams trying to cycle on them in order to get all 15 done, and I don't know.
Hmm.
It really just kind of depends on what kind of intake mechanisms teams have. If they have some
Yeah.
sort of way to extend like just their intake and not have their entire chassis over there, it's there's a slight possibility, but I feel like just the sheer number of them is going to make it really difficult.
Yeah. And like remember, you are allowed to possess two pixels at a time. So that'll definitely, help, cut your cycle time in half as opposed to if you were only possessing one at a time like Skystone. So that'll be interesting to see how teams work that into their deposits this year. But before we go on, we have a giveaway from one of our sponsors, Andy Mark. Tyler, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Our friends from Andy Mark are going to be giving away a $25 Andy Mark gift card. So if you're interested in that, they're really talking a lot about Robots, by the way. If you haven't checked out their new Robots platform that just launched, go to andymark.com/Robots to learn a little bit more about that. And for the $25 gift card, type in Robots. That's your opportunity to win ROBITS. If you are a subscriber to our YouTube channel, because we're doing things differently since we're on YouTube, you get 3 times luck. Absolutely free to subscribe. Click that subscribe button right there. We're going to give you 3 times chance to win. ROBITS, that's your keyword. Hey, Boston Declan, I got to ask you something in regards to the game this year. In the drone end game, what did you think about the near zone being worth 30 points and the far zone being worth 10, and how that dynamic works out instead of the far zone being worth more?
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting. I think it's a good decision on first end. I think it's a lot more of an engineering challenge to get the drones to land in that near zone. There's a lot more risk with not going over the wall and then getting 0 points for them. So I'm very excited about that. Another thing I did notice is that there's no requirement that you can only launch your drone once, right? So like if you are going for that close zone and you miss it because it doesn't go over the field, if teams are able to come up with a mechanism that allows them to pick up their plane again and relaunch it, that could be really interesting and really really effective in guaranteeing that 30 points in endgame. Declan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I 100% agree with the decision they made for the closer to the wall being higher points. Surely because of, if it was just the farther it is, the more points, teams could come up with these like insane RPM flywheel machines just to like absolutely launch the the drone. But having it be closer to the wall, being higher points, really creates this dynamic of like, okay, now we got to actually think about like what angle, what um, like power are we launching the plane, what style plane do we want to design to like try to change the trajectory as it's gliding. So it really encourages teams to like try to think more and strategize about like how they approach this design challenge.
Yeah, and Declan, speaking of the design challenge and everything regarding drones, that's the third thing we wanted to talk about tonight. So, you want to just kick us off?
Yeah, so the main thing I think teams should watch out for is all of the restrictions and requirements that are involved with the drones. The first part is that they must be constructed using one sheet of paper that is no bigger than the standard 8.5 by 11 sheet. They need to be clear and they need to have clear and distinct wings and fuselage or a body of the airplane. This is just to help the planes glide when thrown and not fall like a ballistic, as well as to help counter teams that might want to like crumple up a ball and say that it's their drone. Um, Lastly, the only approved materials to color your planes for the red, blue, and having your team number visible within 12 inches are going to be graphite pencils, ink pens, felt tip markers, and printers. One thing that I noticed is that because you are allowed to use printers to like color and put graphics onto your paper airplane, teams could try to use this to their advantage and put like folding line instructions onto the paper airplane, which could also open up the opportunity for open drones.
Yeah, no, that would definitely be very interesting. Yeah, I can't wait to see what teams come up with for the drones. And one thing I noticed in the game animation is when first was showing like showing the rules regarding the drones and everything. They showed the drones being shot into the second and third landing zones, but they didn't show a drone landing in that first zone yet. So I think they really want people to try and figure out like what's the best way to do this. And I'm interested to see if people tend like towards one meta design or if it's really unclear how to do it. I think this will be more difficult than hitting the power shots in Ultimate Goal. I'll say that. I think doing this consistently will be a lot more difficult than getting those power shots in Ultimate Goal. And I really can't wait to see what teams come up with. I know there will definitely be some really crazy designs. Tyler, what were your thoughts on having the launching zone being the most points closer to the wall?
Uh, so for me, I like the challenge of it because I think when you're using paper or something like that, it's so much more difficult to control for something, versus, I like first idea. Actually, like at first when I saw the animation, I'm like, oh, it kind of stinks that it's going to be so restrictive for stuff. On the other hand, I'm like, I think that actually will be a really cool engineering challenge. They have such a limited resource and be able to do something like that. So I think having the zone structure the way it is makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and like for the past FTC games, it's been all about like speed, speed, speed. You need your robot to go as fast as possible, for as long as possible. But I think this drone challenge really takes a step back and shows that engineering is not only about speed, but really about meeting whatever the requirements are. And in this instance, the requirement is being in that narrow, small window of the launch landing zone one, rather than just going as far out as you can, as quickly as you can. So that'll be super interesting. And we had some comments in the chat about this. So Siddharth Ray said, "What do y'all think about the drones being RNG because of external features? If there's slight wind from an AC event in the venue." So my thoughts on that is there's always things like that in the games. No game is going to be perfect. I think hopefully if that does happen, it'll be the same for all teams. So in one given match. But I also think it's just something teams will have to address. If you have a drone launching mechanism that only works under one very, very specific condition, I think you have to reevaluate your mechanism and just design for increasing that margin of error as much as possible.
Are we going to have
From the
like the
beginning.
equivalent of deflate gate for first, where like it's going to be fan gate and somebody's turning on a fan or something like that?
Yeah, we'll have to see. Especially if we were to be on Minute Maid again this year. I know it's all open in there, right? So you would have it's a particularly windy day or anything like that, I could definitely change it. But yeah, I think that'll be interesting. Declan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like with the idea of like the RNG being like wind or
Hmm.
outside factors, it's kind of like, well, every team now has to deal with this.
Hmm.
Like at least in that game, if not, like the consistency of these RNG events, like over the course of whatever event that they're attending. So while it is annoying that it's like it adds like an extra like factor that you have to adjust for, like everybody kind of has to deal with it, so it's not really an unfair aspect, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Samantha said in the chat, my first thought was that they wanted to avoid team shooting into the audience. Definitely agree with you on there. I'm very surprised that this is just part of the game at all. It's just so different from anything we've seen in any game before. It's like how they had the ducks in Freight Frenzy is just completely different than the freight part of the game, but is duck, just being there because the game design committee can design the games how they want. And then Quinn, I think, brings up another fantastic point in the chat. Drones will also slide differently depending on the floor material. This is definitely something I'm a little more iffy about. I did say that the part of an engineering challenge is adapting to different situations. But the thing is, in relic recovery, there were mats that were laid out in front of the field, right? So there was the same exact floor situation, and you'd be dealing with the same friction forces and everything like that every time you went to place a relic. But this year, with having the different floor tiles or the different floor materials, I think that's going to be kind of strange, and it could get annoying for teams if it's too big of an issue. So yeah, not too happy about that, but we'll see how it turns out. The launch zones or the landing zones are pretty large. It's not just like pixel perfect placement. So hopefully teams can work around with it. Yeah. Declan, any thoughts on that? Oh,
Oh
all
no.
right. And then, another thing I saw in the chat, NA9306 says, what do you think about the team game element and purple pixels being in the way of auto cycling? Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up. This is something I was planning on talking about earlier. I'll spend some time talking about it now. It's something teams really, really have to consider. They can't just go in that second column or the fifth column, depending on which side of the field they're on, just go straight down to those neutral stacks. So they're going to have to be really careful about working around them or going through the middle to avoid them completely. Yeah, Declan, just for reference, we were talking about like having the spike marks, I think they're called, just like the team elements, the team props, and the purple pixels being placed on the floor, and how that's going to affect cycling in autonomous and cycling throughout the game. What do you think? All right. Yeah, and I guess one last thing I wanted to talk about, or if anybody has other topics, we can definitely spend some time talking about them. Is spamming, just putting like a same color mosaic over on the backdrops versus trying to optimize between or the same color pixel on the backdrops versus trying to optimize and make those mosaics as much as possible. So I think this is kind of drawn parallels to relic recovery, where you can either go for those the crypto boxes or the cryptographs, right? And making sure you have the right specific pattern. Or if you're not going to be able to finish anyways, then you're going to just put as many as you can of whatever color is closest. So I think teams will have to balance that. I think going for the mosaics, at least in the beginning, should definitely be doable because you'll be putting that yellow one on first, and then you can pick up the purple one off of the floor, and so you should only need to get one green one from your wing, and so that'll complete one mosaic right there. And after that, making sure you balance the groups of white tiles around the white pixels around the colored pixels is going to be really important. But I think the top teams will go for those mosaics, and they'll be able to balance those with making sure they're fast enough. Yeah. And then, okay, Booty Game said, what do you guys think about teams accidentally knocking all the pixels off the board? So this is something Tyler and I had talked about before we got on air. It's definitely going to happen. It's going to be very unfortunate when it happens. It's just like how poles were getting knocked over, around during in the power play season. It's going to be very unfortunate, but teams know it's a possibility, so they're going to need to do everything they can to make sure it doesn't happen. And I guess the last question we'll take for the night before we wrap up is from Beluga Panda. Can you give a clarification of how mosaics work and how they'll be scored by the refs? So yeah, as Tyler said in the chat, we're not official refs, so anything you want an official statement on, read the game manual, read the Q&A. I can explain my interpretation of it. So essentially, there's 4 different pixels. You have your green, yellow, purple, and your white pixels. And so for a mosaic, the rules are that it has to be composed of either 3 colored pixels of the same color, so all green, all yellow, or all purple, or all 3 have to be different colors, but none of them can be white. So 1 green, 1 yellow, 1 purple. And for these pixels, they have to all be touching each other. So you can't do like a line going upwards, because then the outer 2 aren't touching the inner 2. That's one of the examples in the game manual of like what's an allowed mosaic and what's not. And then also, when having multiple mosaics on a board, you have to make sure that the tiles, the colored tiles, are not touching any other colored tiles. So basically, you need a ring of white tiles around each mosaic to protect it and make sure it's not going against the rules for the other mosaics. I hope that makes sense. But definitely look at the game manual. That'll give you the best explanation. Yeah. All right. So with that, that's going to wrap up our Center Stage breakdown show. Let us know in the fun Discord or comment on the YouTube video what you guys think of the Center Stage game so far. And if you are watching live, we'll be returning very soon with our Robot in 30 Hours stream. We're going to do a day 1 recap of everything the teams have been doing today. And that's going to be in just a moment. And before we head out, Tyler, do you want to draw for the giveaway?
Yeah, let's go ahead and draw for the giveaway once again for the $25 AndyMark gift card. Hey guys, I know there's a lot of noise behind me with the Robot in 30 Hours going on, so we hope you stay around to check that out as we go through on this. But the winner of the giveaway is going to be Booty Games. Congratulations. Saw Booty chatting a few times in there. Booty, please send first updates now a message either on Discord, so me, or email admin@firstupdatesnow.com in order to claim. Thanks a lot to AndyMark for the giveaway. And if you are watching live, we have another AndyMark giveaway to do in just a little bit with the day 1 Robot in 30 Hours recap.
So thank you for all the follows and subscriptions we've received today. Don't forget that you can subscribe for free through Twitch Gaming or on YouTube subscribing. We hope you enjoyed this episode of FTC Live. If you want to stay connected with what First Updates Now FTC is doing, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram @FunFTC, and join our Discord through the link in the chat.
All right, and on behalf of myself, Declan, and our producer Tyler, working with us on screen today, I would like to thank you all for tuning in. Please keep an eye out for future new FTC content coming out on YouTube. The Center Stage season is going to be huge, and our exciting Robot in 30 Hours streams this weekend, which we're going to have just coming up right now. All right, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
This video on First Updates Now is made possible by viewers like you and also the following sponsors. The new Robotics system by AndyMark can reduce complexity and enable robust builds. Parts aligned to a common 1/2-inch grid, simplifying construction and allowing alignment of both structure and motion components. Robotics enables teams to always have the parts they need to complete a build. Head on over to andymark.com/robotics to learn more and order today. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in FIRST Scholarship. Scholarship applications will open in September. Get ready to go pro and get more information at kettering.edu/first. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date on our new videos. Keep the conversation going and provide your input to our content. Watch our live shows at twitch.tv/firstupdatesnow. Join our Discord at discord.gg/firstupdatesnow and check out Fun FTC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and First Updates Now on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter.